Good morning. We are just making sure that you can see okay here. Trying to get a good angle. Hopefully you can hear and see me okay. Welcome to Dorothy's Kitchen. I am trying to do something I've never done before. So hopefully you can let me know if you can hear me okay. I'm happy to share this recipe with you today. Hopefully everything's not super crooked and you can hear me. Hope you're having a good day. Today is a beautiful day in Calgary. I took some pictures of our trees and actually some Christmas decorations that we still have out, and they are so beautiful. So I'm trying something where I'm going live on both Facebook and YouTube at the same time. So my technical skills are not necessarily where they should be. So if you can't hear, please let me know in the comments. And I'm not sure if I set up my Facebook correctly, but I hope everything's good. Give me a thumbs up. Let me know how it's going. And I am trying something new, which is always good. I'm always learning. And here is our sourdough. Excited to share that with you today. I'll show you what it looks like. It is happy and healthy. So super excited to jump into all the sourdough with you today. It is so delicious. It is so good for you. So what I am going to do is share our sourdough bagels. I have the recipe posted in the description, and I will put it in the comment as well of this video. And basically, this is sort of a sourdough discard recipe. So I am using my sourdough that I did feed last night, and it has started to fall down. So because this recipe takes time, I'm trying to do a few different components of this recipe. So you're not gonna see a recipe from step 1 to step, I think I have 13 steps. You won't see everything in the correct sequence today, and I know that's a little bit confusing, but bread takes time to rise. So what I'm gonna do is start off with step 5 and then go back to step 1, if that makes sense, because I want to show you the dough that I already have rising so you can see how I actually do the bagels, because I think that's a unique thing that you may not have seen before, the way that I boil the bagels. I'm hoping that it will be something new that you can learn through this video today. So hope people have had a chance to log in, and I hope we're good to go on the technology side. So thanks for joining me. I really appreciate it. Helps our channel. The more you watch our content and share it, we really appreciate it. I will start off by showing some bagels I made yesterday and something that I've been learning. I tested 2 ways of boiling the bagels, and I'll show you the difference. This is, first of all, what I would call the good bagel. It is so nice and puffy. They both taste delicious, but what I was finding is that it was sticking to the parchment paper. And I was thinking, you know what, I think in my past I've seen a way that you can deal with this problem. So what I decided to do was cut up my parchment paper, leave it stuck, and then just flip it in the water on the parchment paper and then carefully remove it. And I'll show you how that works. I hope you can see it okay because my stove is a little ways away. So let me know in the comments if you can hear me okay. And hopefully you can see, because I can make some slight adjustments. But this is it's not bad, it's still good, but I have a better way that I have never seen before on how you can make your bagels super nice and puffy. So I hope this can be really beneficial to you. Time well spent, and you can make yourself some very delicious homemade sourdough bagels. So here we go. What I'm going to do is just pull out the dough that I have rising. I'll set that to the side. So I, this morning, whipped up a batch of dough, and I've had it rising in my oven for about an hour. And here's what it is looking like. Here's the current state of events. It's looking great. This is the perfect time to do these bagels. So the tricky thing is they have to rise 2 times. That's why we're gonna start with this. Then I'm gonna go back and show you how I do the dough, and then these will be ready to boil because I have them in my oven on the bread proof setting. So that kind of cuts my rising time in half, I find. So we're gonna form the bagels, then we're gonna make the dough, which is a bit backwards, and then we're going to boil the bagels. So hopefully that makes sense. I will definitely share the recipe, no worries there. And please ask me any questions. Let me know where you're watching from. Always like to hear from everyone. And I'm gonna turn my dough out right now onto my lightly floured surface. So that is really step 5 if you're looking at my recipe. And we're gonna divide this up. Now, you have a choice if you wanna divide this into larger size bagels like the ones I showed. I'll show you again if you're just joining. So this is about 140 grams of dough. So that, it's a pretty substantial size bagel. For my younger kids, they only eat half a bagel. It's a little bit too much for them. So you can make them whatever size you want, whatever your heart desires. But we're going to make these about between 135 grams and 140. And I don't have a bench scraper. I just use, hello, Elizabeth from, wow, Trinidad and Tobago. Yes, wow, that is a long ways away. So we are going to just segment our dough out here. And as I said, you can make them whatever size you want. Personally, I'm aiming for 135 grams to about no more than 140. And I do weigh them out. I'm not really like a super specific baker all the time, but the thing with this kind of thing is they have to bake evenly. And so if you don't have a scale, just do your best, it doesn't matter. But if you do, pull it out, dust it off, or maybe you use it all the time. Let me know who uses a kitchen scale for weighing out your dough. I think for sourdough, it's really actually makes the process faster. So that's kind of nice. I'm just trying to tear my scale here. It's not cooperating. There we go. So about what I'm aiming for is between 135 and 140. So that one's too much, 145. I'm gonna shrink it down a little bit here. So this is a little bit of a time-consuming process. Just a smidgen more. So I form these into balls at this point. Once I have them weighed out as I want them to be, I form them into a nice ball. I kind of work it in my hands. And then Nova Scotia. Oh, my mom's watching today. Welcome. We did not make a lot of sourdough as kids, but I actually forgot to ask my mom, did your mom make sourdough? Who grew up eating sourdough? So this one, I've got to double check. Yeah, perfect. I love it when it's like bang on the scale. So convenient. So I usually keep these covered. I'm gonna just keep those covered as I go, either back in the bowl or on your counter, just sort of letting those rest for a few minutes. I form them all into the balls, and then I'll show you the next step. Okay, so I'm going for 135. It's a little much for me. Perfect. So form them all into the balls, keep them covered. A little, not enough. Okay. So if you're just joining, I'm following my recipe and I'm on step 5 right now because I made this dough in the morning. Let it rise for an hour. And this is a sourdough discard recipe. 128, a little more. You could make mini bagels as well. It's really a versatile recipe. So hi, Darlene. Hello, everyone that's watching. Okay. So, I'm trying to do more lives to interact more with folks. It's kind of fun because making a video is a lot of clicking. It's a lot of monotonous work, and here I get to do my recipe. My kids get to enjoy it, and I also get to interact and get to know everyone, so that's kind of nice. So far I have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think that one's a little small. 130. Who here is a sourdough baker? Who likes baking with sourdough? Let me know. I am definitely a beginner when it comes to sourdough. This is the first starter that I've had that has been successful for me. Now this is what's gonna happen to me. I'm gonna end up with a little mini bit at the end here. So what I do is just then divvy it out because I don't wanna make one that's super small. So I'm gonna have him join one of his friends. Just kind of put a little bit on each of the dough balls. Okay, so now once I have my nice ball, I found this works really well for making bagels. I've seen a lot of recipes where they say just stick your finger in the middle, but through trial and error, just beginning, oh, okay, cool. I'm like you, Lisa, I am learning, but I have learned some tricks because I've been doing a lot of it. It's like intensive learning. I've been baking so much over the past few months here. So I just stick something that's plastic kind of in the middle. That's what I was trying to explain in my recipe. So it makes like a little hole, because if you use your finger, it kind of sticks to it. Then I kind of do it like a wheel movement. I don't know how to describe that very well. Probably didn't explain it right in the recipe, but I kind of do that. And you want to over exaggerate it. We're in Canada and we have toonies. So this is like 4 times the size of a toonie, I would say. So once I have that exaggerated circle, because as that rises, you're gonna lose a lot of your circle. I can show you again. Even though I did these exaggerated circles, some of mine kind of puff up so much that they just have like a minute circle in the end. So you want to make it bigger than you think, so it can rise up. So I'm just going to put that on my parchment paper, and I'm going to have to let this rise again for another 30 to 40 minutes. So today I'm going to try to rush it in my oven. So I'm going to get these done quickly and pop them in my oven for doing the rise. Yeah, I posted a recipe for starters. Now the thing is, there's so many recipes out there, and I actually had people advise me, you know, don't bother trying to make your own starter. But for me, I like to try to do everything on my own. I don't know. I've made kombucha before, started my own SCOBY. It's not that hard. It just takes a little research, and I think it's worth it. You get such a sense of accomplishment in the end. So I'm gonna try to keep these guys covered. It's gonna take up 2 trays. So if you want, I did post my starter recipe. Hopefully it's relatively easy to follow. I'm always trying to adapt and make things better. So there's my large hole there. So that's 4. You want to give them some space on your tray. So I may just put those 4 on the tray. Now I have 4 more, so that's perfect. I'm actually going to pop these right into my bread proofing oven. And then I'll continue with my next tray. Okay, so I'm just basically using that knife or whatever you have, something that makes sort of an indentation, and it's so slick. Now if you have one side that's thinner than the other, you have to watch that you don't break them. I find this method works so much better than rolling them out in like that snake shape. leaving them whole in the circle, it works really well for me. I do the same thing actually with my 2 ingredient bagels. So that just is a method that works for me. And I stick with it. Once I figure something out that works, I don't mess with a good thing. Okay, we're just gonna keep going. 2 more left. Then I'll show you how I make the dough. And these guys will rise and then we'll boil them. Hopefully that makes sense. Otherwise, I would have to make 3 batches and I will have bagels rolling down the street. So it's such nice dough to work with. It's you can manipulate it so well. So you make them as large as you want in the center, because remember, they are going to puff up for you. They have yeast and they have the sourdough in there too. So they get really nice and puffy. Okay, those are going to go in my oven for as long as they can today, but ideally you would wait for about 30 minutes to let those kind of really get nice and puffy. And it really depends on your own conditions how quickly that process will take. Now what we're going to do is we are going to use active dry yeast, and we're going to make a little slurry here with our yeast so that we can sort of start from the beginning. So this is like reverse. We're going back in time and we're going to start with number 1 now. Okay, I'm going to show you how I actually make the dough so that we can make our sourdough bagels. So we do use active dry yeast, and we're going to just start with number 1. Here's my biggest tip, and you may have seen this before, but you really need to use water that is not chlorinated, because if you are using water that has chlorine in it for bread making, it's not going to turn out as well. It's so important. I use Berkey water because I live in a city. I grew up in a very small area of Nova Scotia, and we had spring water. And I remember my dad always saying, this is like the best thing you're going to ever have. And it is amazing. So my family doesn't need to use a Berkey because they have beautiful, amazing spring water. But if you live in a city or have a well that sometimes needs chlorine, then don't use that water, or at least let the chlorine evaporate from that water overnight, because you do not want to damage your yeast with your chlorinated water. So we're starting with 2 1/4 teaspoons. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna put my water in first. Oh, that's okay. Okay, let's just start with the yeast. I already got some in there. So 2 1/4 of the active dry yeast. Okay, what I do, I'm gonna use a bowl for this, is I combine half of my water half of my hot water, half with hot water, half with just room temperature water. So what I'm gonna do here, this is a total of about 236 grams of water. So I just have this room temperature water here. So half a cup of room temperature, half a cup of boiled water. And then you can just test it. If you have a thermometer, you can make sure that it's not more than 100 degrees Fahrenheit. So I will just add that in. And then we're gonna add in some honey to get this yeast activated. And I use 2 tablespoons of honey. You could use maple syrup for this. You could use sugar, but we like the honey. So I'm gonna do 2 tablespoons of that. I always spray my tablespoon with a little bit of oil so that it comes out of my measuring spoon easy, slick. So I'll just give that a little stir. And I'm gonna put this in a warm area and allow that to double up while I talk about the sourdough. Or not double up. It's gonna get very bubbly. The yeast will have a good time in there and enjoy their honey. Okay, we'll let them be. Give them time to bubble. I find this is a great thing. You don't, I suppose, have to do this step if you're in a rush, but it actually in the end saves you time, because if the yeast is really activated, it makes the whole process much faster. So I'm going to put that in the warmest spot I have here and let that be for 5 minutes while I talk about our sourdough step. And I somehow, oh yes, I have my bowl all ready. Okay, so what I'm using today is bread flour. I find bread flour to be the best thing to make most of my breads with. I get this at Costco. It's a strong baker's flour. It works so well for me. So what I'm gonna do to this is add my salt first of all. And I need, I'm gonna dry my measuring spoon here. 2 teaspoons of salt. And I'm just gonna have that ready. I know I've had people say before, oh, that seems like a lot of salt. Salt is a really important part of bread making. And how do I know this? Because I have left out salt before when I'm rushing and making my bread. I've made thousands of loaves of bread. If you do not put salt in, has anyone done this before? Basically, it causes everything to get overinflated. And that's not good. It does not turn out. It can either become very dense in the end or very flat. These are not things you want to see as a bread maker. Trust me. So don't forget your salts. I put it in with my flour so it's kind of dispersed evenly. All right, so that's all I do is just kind of mix that in. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add my sourdough. Now you could just use a measuring cup for this, but because I have a scale, I do use it. So I wrote the grams in the recipe, as well as I also wrote it in cups if you are a cup baker. So I'm just going to tare this to 0. And hopefully that will work for me. Slowly, slowly, slowly. I'm going to press it again. Okay, so what we're going to do, we are on, if you're following the recipe, we are now on step 2. So I start with 3 of the 4 cups in my bowl. I keep 1 to the side because I don't want to have too much flour in my mixture. When you make bread, the exact amount of flour seems to change based on the temperature. It changes depending on your elevation. It depends on the humidity. So I start with 3 because I don't want to get into a situation where I have too much flour. It's a hard thing to try to compensate and add more water. It just makes it messy. So this is my technique that I've used and it works so well for me. I reserve back about a cup. Maybe if you're looking at the whole recipe and it has different amounts, about a quarter of it I set aside. So that way I can just slowly knead that in as I go so that I don't have a big mess of too thick of dough that takes so much time to try to fix afterward. So this is a really helpful thing that I have just kind of learned on my own by making thousands of loaves of bread. This is my method that I do, is reserve back a little bit of that flour. Okay, so we're gonna start with the 3 cups. We've got the salt in. Now we're gonna add in our sourdough starter. And I was hoping I would have enough. That's why I wasn't sure if I could go live today. But look at this beautiful sourdough starter. I just fed it last night and it's so bubbly, so delicious looking. Maybe you don't think so, but it is so good and so healthy for you. So we are using, as I said, 1 cup. I'm just going to check on the number here. It's 285 grams. My scale all of a sudden is off by 0.5 of a gram. There we go. 285. And I am going to try not to use all of this because I like this little container. I'm going to refeed this. 285. Is that what I said? Yes. So I just keep a little bit in my container and I'm going to refeed this and it's going to tomorrow be back up to what it just was. It's pretty amazing. So I'm going to use a little bit of my reserve as well. I do whole wheat, and I do I have a whole wheat starter, and I have a just bread flour starter. So I'm just using a smidgen of that because I want to make sure I have enough. 285. I need a little bit more. But these are my main jars that I use to feed. I keep on hand all the time, and then I take some out. But because I've been making so many bagels, I don't quite have enough in that jar. So 285. Oh man, I'm so close. I'm at 282. I'm just gonna use a little bit more. I just need to grow more starter. There we go. Oh, that'll be too much, I think. Okay, so that I like to weigh out my starter because it's very sticky. There we go, perfect. All right, now what I'm gonna do, we are on, let's see. We're still on step 2. We're adding in that water that we have, the water and the activated yeast. Now I would normally let this sit a little longer. It is bubbly, but it could be even more. But for the sake of you guys not wanting to watch yeast grow, I'm gonna pop that in. It's definitely bubbly, but I actually usually wait 10 minutes for that to get super bubbled up. Okay, so we're gonna give that a stir. So I just stir this, and there's a lot of rumors out there that you're not supposed to use stainless steel with sourdough. I think that comes from like in ancient times when metal was not the same, when people used actual silver utensils. So if you have stainless steel, it's totally fine to use. And how do I know that's okay? Because I've tried it and I have very successful breads, and all my sourdough recipes turn out really well. So we're just gonna work this in. So it's a very shaggy dough right now. And I just kind of work it, and then I scrape off my fork. I would like to also say I do not have all the fancy sourdough equipment. I do everything the same way that I do regular bread. The only difference is I use a different yeast now. So you don't have to invest hundreds of dollars to try to start making sourdough. I really wanted to do it that way because I thought, you know what? I know this can be done. I don't need all the fancy dough hooks. Not to say that I might not get one if I really like this. But you don't have to have all of that equipment to make a successful loaf. And you can look at my channel. I've posted up some of my baking so you can see what it looks like, so you can trust what I'm saying. Okay, so I just get that all out of my bowl, and now we are going to just knead this. Now I should probably take off my ring. Don't always, but. So I just slowly work the last cup of the flour in, and that way it works like a charm. Who here likes to knead by hand, and who has a mixer? I will just say that this will work in a mixer as well. I've seen a lot of people make their dough in a mixer, but for some reason, I don't know, I've just always learned to make bread by hand and knead it all by hand. I enjoy it. I also find that it just, I can't really tell, I wouldn't be able to tell if it was ready and in a mixer as well. I just like this. I'm able to make lots of bread just by hand right here on my island. Works well for me. So I'm mixing this in. Now I said 5 to 10 minutes. I'm gonna try to mix at a fast pace. So this is going to rise up in a greased bowl. I use a little bit of cooking spray. Put that in my bowl. Let that rise for up to an hour. You also I'm just reading. Oh, Darlene uses both. Yeah. Both methods. You can interchange. That's the thing. You don't have to be 100% of a mixer person and 100% of a hand kneader. You can do whatever works for you on that given day. I'm gonna just cover up my sourdoughs. I don't want them to dry out because they're almost depleted. I need to feed them right after I finish with you guys. So it's such a nice soft dough. Like, this is nowhere near ready, but look, it's so nice and soft. I love a dough that's nice and soft like that. I have a feeling this is not going to take another full cup today. It's going to depend on your own starter and how much water you use in your starter. Not everyone uses the exact same recipe, so if you don't need the full 4 cups, don't worry. That's why I don't like adding it all at the beginning. I just slowly work it in. Every few kneads, add a little sprinkle, and that's all there is to it. So once I have got this to a point where I'm happy with it, I'll show you, and then we'll move on to what the bagels look like as they're boiling. We'll move on to we'll skip a few steps because we'll go back to what we have in the oven that we made at the beginning. So making bagels is really fun, and they're so tasty. We've made pretzels so far. We've made biscuits. We've made regular bread. We've made, what else have we made? Am I forgetting? Did I say pretzels? Yes. And we've made like just an artisan loaf. But I haven't tried English muffins yet. I haven't done too much with pancakes and waffles. Let me know what you like to do with your sourdough discard. Oh, banana bread. Made a discard banana bread. That was very, very tasty. So moist, and it's just so nice. Really enjoy all of the different forms of discard recipes that we've tried. So this would be considered a discard recipe because we're still using, you can, if you have active yeast, you could even try that. You know, active sourdough. That's the thing with sourdough. It's very forgiving. People think that there's only one right way, or at least I did when I started with sourdough. But there's room for doing things differently. You do what works for you, and if it works, then you keep going. You just have to have that kind of adventurous spirit. Hi, Megan. I see one of my family members watching here. Thanks for the tip on the baking show that you sent me. I'm looking into it. I just did a competition called The Greatest Baker, which was a virtual competition, and now there's a in-person one here in Canada. So I don't know. I don't know if I'm ready for another round of a competition. I think it's a lot of work. Have any of you tried a recipe for bagels yet? I actually had never even made regular bagels before, but the sourdough ones, I was just like, you know what, I'm just gonna jump into it. I often made the 2 ingredient bagels, and they were just so easy. I didn't even bother trying to learn the other kind, but with sourdough, I'm just feeling adventurous. So, and these ones have turned out so well. I've made them quite a few times so far. I always like to test my recipes a number of times before I share them, because I want to make sure that I figure out all the problems. Oh, never. Well, you'll have to get a starter going. That's the other thing. It actually only took me about 5 days to get enough for discarding. I did not discard all the time. I saw a lot of people who say, oh, you have to discard every day. I don't like wasting things in general. So I was like, I have to figure out some good discard recipes, but I actually ended up just starting with a smaller quantity, and I didn't really need to discard much for the first few days. And I put my recipe experience on Facebook, so you'll have to check it out if you want to make your own sourdough starter. All right, this is looking good. I'm trying to rush everything a little bit today because I don't want you to have to sit there and watch me knead dough. So ask me any questions if you like right now, because I'm going to move on to a little bit more of an intensive time of boiling bagels. You have to be quick with it. Usually I have my son and he sets a timer for me and like keeps setting the timer over and over. I'll show you how it works. You have to be on your toes. So I won't show you all of them today. I'll just do a few so you get the point. Okay, this is looking really nice. And I used about 3/4 of the flour that I had set out. And I'll show you the dough. This is what it looks like. So it is, how do you do? And you're through kneading. Yes, so the next step, is that what you mean, Pat? What is the next step here? So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna put this in a bowl. I have my grease bowl here. And I usually drop it in and then I kind of spin it around and then I flip it, and because that lets it get a little bit of the grease on the top. And then I cover that, and that's gonna rise up and double for approximately 60 minutes. So I'm gonna put that in my oven, but I'm gonna pull out the other bagels. By the magic of television, we have some bagels. Now, you can look at these while I wash off the extra dough. So this is what they're looking like. And I'll show you those in just a second. I have to wash my hands. Okay, so what I'm gonna do while right now is I'm gonna turn my water. I'm using my largest pot and it is filled up about 3/4 of the way. I said about 10 cups, but it depends on the size of your, your pot, how much you want to put in there. So I have about 10 cups in there. When that comes to a full boil, which will be in just a moment because I have an induction stove, so it's like instantly giant pot of water is boiling. I won't watch it because a watch pot never boils. So these, pretend they were raised or in there for, basically for me, cuts the time in half. So about an hour, you want these to rise up again. So that's what we have right now. The problem that I was personally encountering was they were sticking to my parchment paper, and I'll show you an in-person live example of what was happening. So as I would pull them off my parchment paper, it started to deflate them and they were not as puffy. I was like, oh, they're so perfect. They're so nice and puffy. How can I keep them nice and puffy when I go to boil them? So I was like, what am I gonna do? So I decided I would just cut my parchment paper up so that they would be not deflated. I'll show you what I mean. I don't know if I explained that properly, but see how nice and puffy this one is compared to this guy? It got deflated as I would pull the bagels off. So I'll show you how I fix that problem. And the other thing is you don't want them to be too close together while they're rising, because then they stick and then they deflate as well. So I will show you what I do to deal with that problem, because as soon as my water boils, I'm gonna add in 1 tablespoon of brown sugar and 1 tablespoon of baking soda. That allows it to get that nice brown crust as it's baking. That sort of also the chewy exterior. Traditionally, bagels would be boiled in a lye bath. I don't have lye. I know you can purchase it, But instead of doing that, you can use something as a substitute, which is baking soda. Now, I know if you're a professional baker, you might not be happy with somebody using baking soda, but for me, in my own home, it's a great substitute. I have great success with just using the baking soda. Okay, so what I do to offset the problem that I was having is I just cut up my parchment paper carefully so I don't deflate my bagels, and I leave them stuck. I just literally cut it out, cut around, and I leave them stuck to the parchment paper. So see how it's still nice and puffy? If I were to pull that off, it deflates the bagel a little bit. So I don't want to do that. And I'm going to cut them up with the parchment still stuck to them. You could probably also spray your parchment paper to help with that. I just didn't try that. So I just cut them up and it works well for me. I'm going to get a little bit more parchment paper. You kind of have to have all your ducks in a row when you start boiling, because it is a bit of a messy process. Okay, I have my extra container here, or extra cookie sheets with parchment paper actually already. So I'll have that to the side. My water is boiling. Can you still see? I don't want to block it from you. So I have my water boiling. I wish I had an overhead camera that I could show you a bit closer, but I'll try to bring the pot over so you can see. I only boil them for about 30 seconds to a minute on each side. And I'm going to flip them with my slotted spoon. So as they go in, I am just going to time them for about 30 seconds to a minute. I'm going to put them in upside down. So I'm going to take this. Actually, let me put my, here's my sugar. And the sugar just offsets that acidity of the baking soda. And I just use a tablespoon of both. Okay? I have to turn mine down because it starts to bubble up a lot. So I do 2 at a time. You don't want to crowd them. So I'm going to actually turn that down. It doesn't have to be like a massive boil. And I'm going to put that in upside down. I'll kind of show you. And I'm going to time that for 30 seconds, which normally I use my phone, and you guys are my phone. So that's what it looks like. Upside down, 30 seconds in the pot. And as it's boiling, that steam releases the parchment paper. And I can just pull it off. Boop, voila. And they start to float very quickly in there. And then at the 30-second mark, I just flip them over. I think that's been 30 seconds. I just do a flip and a flip. This is all I have for a slotted spoon. You probably have a better one. So use a slotted spoon because you don't want the water to be back on your tray. So I'm just preparing my next ones as those guys are boiling. And at the 30-second, 45 seconds is okay too. Even up to a minute is no problem. I'm gonna pull them out. I just lost my cookie sheet. There it is. I let them drain, and I'll show you what they look like. So they do get a little bit wrinkly, but they're much puffier this way, stuck to the parchment, or putting the parchment paper in with them, than they would have been. So that's what they look like after they're boiled. And I'm going to pop the next 2 in, and I'll show you the egg wash while we do this. So another 30 seconds, upside down, both of them in upside down. And I repeat that process obviously for all of the 8 bagels, or 10 depending on the size that you made them. Okay, so I just made up my egg wash here. I do add about a teaspoon of water to my egg. I gotta flip these guys. Oh, I forgot to take the parchment off. So the steam helps release the parchment paper, I find. Ooh, hot. And then I'm gonna flip them. So they end up on their good side. They show their good side in the end. And I'm just gonna put my egg wash on these guys. And I'm gonna make these ones into cinnamon sugar. So I'll show you that. Then I'll tell you about the baking process and we'll be done for today, folks. So ask me any questions. Hopefully I'm explaining this so that you can understand and replicate this for yourselves. Thank you, Darlene. Yeah, happy to share. Love to help. I'm a teacher, that's my job. So I like to help people solve their problems in the kitchen. That's my favorite thing to do, is to help people with this kind of thing. So, all right. This guy's good. I'm gonna put him on my tray. See how nice and fluffy they stay? So we're just gonna put those on. Then we're gonna do our egg wash. I'm actually gonna shut this off because I won't show you all 8. It's kind of repetitive. So there's 4. And see how nice and puffy they've gotten? Quite amazing. The sourdough and the active dry yeast together makes them really nice. But yet they have that classic outer chewiness that a bagel should have. That's so nice. And I was always intimidated by that boiling process, but it's like literally 30 seconds. It's so easy. So that's what they look like with the egg wash. Sometimes we do sesame seeds. I just sprinkle on the sesame seeds. And then sometimes I do a cinnamon sugar. I recommend brown sugar mixed with your cinnamon. And I just sprinkle it on. I try not to do too much because all the excess can burn, but try to keep it on the top. There's probably a better way you could do this. I just try to sprinkle it. And then these are ready for baking. So if you didn't have 2 other things in your oven, my husband and I looked for an oven that had 2 compartments when we were buying our new one. Unfortunately, it ended up that I don't think they were as good a quality, at least the ones in our price range. So we ended up getting a regular oven. But if I ever have a new kitchen, my goal would be to have 2 ovens because I constantly, on the daily, need 2 ovens, especially at big times like Thanksgiving and Christmas. Probably then I would need 3 ovens. So it's a matter of timing everything. At least I really like this induction stove that we have. Samsung has had a bad reputation, I think. So we don't have a fancy oven, but it works really well for us. It probably took me, I would say, 6 months to figure out the differences between that and my new one compared to my old one. Okay, so here we are, just sprinkled on. I don't really make a recipe for the cinnamon sugar. I just put a bit of cinnamon, a bit of sugar, mix it together, make sure there's no lumps. So that's what these guys look like. They are ready right now for the oven. And what I'm gonna do is bake these at 425. And I always hate to put the exact amount of time because it really depends. I just realized I don't know if I have if I said to preheat your oven. I think I'll fix my recipe. So I bake these at 425 for between 16 and 20 minutes. It depends on the size of your bagel, and it also depends on how hot your oven is, you know, how quickly it bakes. Ours actually bakes pretty fast because it has some really good fans. I don't use convection for sure, just use regular bake, but about 16 to 20 minutes, and you will have yourself a fresh homemade sourdough bagel. So hope you've enjoyed all our tips for the sourdough bagels. Happy to share them with you today. And please, feel free to ask me any questions. I try to get back to people right away, and I appreciate this. Please share our videos if you can, so that more people can join and join our community and share our passion for baking healthy from scratch. Well, healthy, I guess we'd say healthier things from scratch. That's really what we do here. So thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.